Billionaire Tycoon heard her sing. It was the same song his wife used to sing to his daughter. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Marcus Rothwell's corner office on the 47th floor of the Rothwell Technologies building in downtown Seattle. The October storm had been relentless for 3 days, matching his mood perfectly. He stared at the city below, watching tiny figures scurry between buildings like ants seeking shelter, while he remained trapped in his glass tower, isolated, untouchable, and utterly alone despite being surrounded by hundreds of employees. His assistant knocked softly on the mahogany door. "Mr. Rothwell, the Nashville presentation is ready for your review." Marcus didn't turn around. "Cancel it, Patricia. Send Harrison instead. Sir, this is the renewable energy partnership we've been developing for 8 months. The board expects—" I said cancel it. His voice carried the weight of someone who'd grown tired of being questioned. Patricia's heels clicked against the marble floor as she retreated, closing the door with practiced silence. Marcus finally turned from the window, his reflection ghostly in the darkened glass. At 52, he still possessed the sharp jawline and piercing blue eyes that had graced the covers of Forbes and Fortune. But something fundamental had died in those eyes 3 years ago. The same day Elena had taken her last breath in their bedroom overlooking Lake Washington, the intercom buzzed again. "Daddy." The small voice made his chest tighten. He pressed the button. "Yes, sweetheart?" "Mrs. Henderson says dinner's ready, but I'm not hungry." Sophia hadn't been hungry for much of anything since the funeral. At 8 years old, she'd retreated into a shell so thick that even the best child psychologists in Seattle couldn't crack it. She attended her exclusive private school, completed her homework with mechanical precision, and spoke only when directly questioned. The vibrant little girl who used to fill their house with laughter and song had vanished, leaving behind a polite stranger who happened to share his DNA. "I'll be right down, Soph." The elevator descended silently to their penthouse level. Marcus had bought the entire top 3 floors of the building after Elena's diagnosis, wanting to keep work and family close during her treatment. Now the space felt like a mausoleum, filled with memories that cut like broken glass. Sophia sat at one end of their dining table that could seat 20, picking at grilled salmon, while Mrs. Henderson, their live-in housekeeper, hovered nearby with maternal concern. The 8-year-old had Elena's delicate bone structure and dark hair, but where Elena's eyes had sparkled with mischief and warmth, Sophia's held only shadows. "How was school today?" Marcus asked, taking his usual seat at the head of the table. "Fine, Mrs. Patterson says you finished your math workbook ahead of schedule." Yes, Marcus tried a different approach. "Would you like to visit Grandma and Grandpa Castellano this weekend? They've been asking about you." Sophia shrugged, which he'd learned was her way of saying she didn't care either way. Elena's parents called weekly, their Italian accents thick, with concern for their only grandchild. They'd offered repeatedly to take Sophia for extended visits to their home in San Francisco, but Marcus couldn't bear the thought of losing the last piece of Elena he had left. After dinner, he followed Sophia to her room, a princess palace that Elena had designed with hand-painted murals of castles and fairy gardens. Sophia had stopped asking for bedtime stories 2 years ago, but she still allowed him to tuck her in, one of the few physical connections she hadn't rejected. "Daddy," she whispered as he pulled her covers up to her chin. "What is it, sweetheart?" "Do you think Mommy can still hear us when we talk to her?" The question hit him like a physical blow. I think she can." "Why?" "Because I tried singing her song yesterday, but I can't remember all the words, and if she can hear me, she'll know I forgot." Elena's lullaby. She'd made it up when Sophia was a baby, humming the same haunting melody every night while adding different words about their day, their dreams, their love. After Elena got sick, she'd recorded herself singing it on Marcus's phone, knowing there would come a time when her voice would be all they had left. But somehow, in the chaos of grief and funeral arrangements and learning to be a single father, Marcus had lost that phone. He'd searched everywhere, hired data recovery specialists, even offered $1 million reward, but Elena's voice had vanished into the digital ether like smoke. I forgot some of the words too, Soph. But maybe we can remember them together. Nodded solemnly and closed her eyes. Marcus sat in the rocking chair Elena had used for midnight feedings and early morning cuddles, watching his daughter's breathing slow into sleep. The rain continued its assault on the windows, and somewhere in the distance a siren wailed through the Seattle night. His phone buzzed with an urgent message from his CFO. The Nashville deal was falling apart without his presence. $300 million in renewable energy infrastructure hung in the balance, along with thousands of jobs and his company's expansion into the Southeast market. Marcus looked at his sleeping daughter one more time, then made a decision that would change everything. He texted back, "Book me on the first flight to Nashville tomorrow. I'll handle this personally." The humidity hit Marcus like a wall as he stepped out of Nashville International Airport. Even in late October, Tennessee still held summer's grip, a stark contrast to Seattle's perpetual drizzle. His driver, a chatty local named Earl, provided commentary on every landmark as they headed downtown. "First time in Music City?" Earl asked, glancing in the rearview mirror at Marcus's expensive suit and distracted expression. "Business," Marcus replied curtly, already regretting not taking his private jet directly to the meeting location. "Well, you picked a good week. CMA Fest might be over, but the music never stops down here. Every corner's got someone picking a guitar or singing their heart out, hoping to catch a break." Marcus tuned out the chatter, focusing instead on the presentation, materials from Meridian Energy Partners. The deal would position Rothwell Technologies as a major player in sustainable infrastructure, but it required delicate negotiation with old-money Southern investors who valued relationships over spreadsheets. The Hermitage Hotel stood like a beacon of old-world elegance in the heart of downtown Nashville. Marcus had stayed there before, drawn to its quiet luxury and efficient staff who understood the value of discretion. After checking in, he had 3 hours before dinner with the Meridian executives. Against his better judgment, he decided to walk. Seattle's tech bubble had insulated him from most human interaction, but Nashville's streets pulsed with an energy that was impossible to ignore. Street performers occupied every corner, their guitar cases open for donations while tourists and locals alike paused to listen. Marcus found himself drawn toward the Cumberland River, where Riverfront Park offered a brief respite from the urban chaos. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that Elena would have loved. She'd been the artist in their relationship, always pointing out colors and shadows that escaped his businessman's eye. That's when he heard. The melody drifted across the park like a ghost, so familiar yet impossible. Marcus froze mid-step, his heart hammering against his ribs. It was Elena's song, the same haunting tune she'd hummed to Sophia every night, the melody that had been lost with his broken phone. Following the sound like a man possessed, Marcus pushed through a small crowd gathered around a young woman sitting on a wooden bench. She couldn't have been more than 30, with long black hair and delicate Asian features. Her guitar was worn and scarred, clearly well-loved, and her voice carried a raw emotion that made the hair on his arms stand up. The words were different, something about lonely highways and broken dreams, but the melody was identical. Note for note, the same tune that had filled their Seattle home with love and warmth and hope. Marcus stood transfixed until the song ended, and the small crowd dispersed, dropping bills and coins into her guitar case. The woman began packing up her instrument, clearly finished for the evening. "Excuse me," Marcus called out, his voice rough with emotion. She looked up, startled. Up close, he could see she was younger than he'd initially thought, maybe late 20s, with intelligent dark eyes and calloused fingertips that spoke of countless hours of practice. "That song," he continued, struggling to find words. "The melody, where did you learn it?" "I wrote it," she said simply, continuing to pack her guitar. "Something wrong with it?" "No, it's beautiful." "Did you write the music too, or just the lyrics?" She paused, studying his face with curious intensity. "Both. Been working on it for about 6 months now. It's not finished yet, but sometimes you just have to let a song breathe, you know?" Marcus felt like he was drowning. That's impossible. My wife, she used to sing that exact melody to our daughter years ago. The woman's expression softened. Music travels in mysterious ways. Maybe we heard the same thing somewhere and it stuck. Happens to writers all the time. She stood, slinging her guitar case over her shoulder. I'm Lily, by the way. Lily Chen. Marcus. He didn't offer his last name, not wanting to complicate the moment with recognition or assumptions about his wealth. Well, Marcus, it was nice meeting you. I hope your wife and daughter enjoy the music wherever they are. My wife died 3 years ago, he said quietly. And my daughter, she's forgotten the words to that song. It was the last connection she had to her mother. Lily stopped walking. In the dying light of the Tennessee evening, Marcus saw something shift in her expression. Compassion mixing with understanding in a way that reminded him painfully of Elena. I'm sorry for your loss, she said, and he could tell she meant it. Music has a way of holding on to people even after they're gone. Maybe that's what happened here. Would you... Marcus began, then stopped. What was he doing? This was insane. Never mind, I should go. What were you going to ask? He looked at her, really looked. Lily Chen was nothing like Elena physically, but something in her presence, her openness, reminded him of the woman he'd lost, and she held the key to something his daughter desperately needed. Would you be willing to teach someone that song? I know it sounds crazy, but my daughter, she's 8, and she's been struggling since her mother died. If she could remember that melody... Lily was quiet for a long moment, considering. I don't usually do private lessons. I work at a coffee shop during the day and play here most evenings. I could make it worth your while. This isn't about money, is it? Marcus shook his head. It's about giving a little girl back a piece of her mother. The city lights were beginning to flicker on around them, and somewhere in the distance another street musician began playing. Lily adjusted her guitar strap and looked at Marcus with eyes that seemed to see straight through his expensive suit. To the grieving father beneath. I live in Seattle, he added, but I could arrange for you to come there, or we could set up video lessons, or... Seattle's a long way from Nashville. Please, I'll pay for everything. Travel, accommodations, whatever you need, just please. Lily's studio apartment sat above the Grind Coffee House on Music Row, accessible only through a narrow staircase that creaked with every step. Marcus had followed her there after she'd agreed to discuss his proposition over coffee, though he suspected she was still trying to figure out if he was legitimate or just another Nashville dreamer with more money than sense. The space was cramped, but cozy, filled with musical instruments, sheet music, and the kind of creative chaos that Elena would have appreciated. An old upright piano dominated one corner, its surface covered with composition notebooks and coffee-stained napkins bearing hastily scrawled lyrics. Sorry about the mess, Lily said, clearing music sheets from a small table. I wasn't expecting company. Marcus looked around, taking in the details. Framed photographs showed Lily performing at various venues, always with the same worn guitar he'd seen at the park. A Berklee music degree hung on the wall next to what appeared to be a songwriting award from a local Nashville competition. You're not from Tennessee originally, he observed. San Francisco. Came here 5 years ago to make it in country music, like every other dreamer with a guitar. She poured 2 cups of coffee from a pot that had clearly seen better days. Turns out being half Chinese in Nashville's country scene has its challenges. But you stayed. Music City gets in your blood. Plus I'm stubborn. She handed him the coffee, studying his face. What about you? You don't strike me as a typical tourist. Marcus hesitated. Once he revealed who he was, everything would change. People always changed when they learned about his wealth, becoming either obsequious or suspicious, rarely remaining simply human. I run a tech company in Seattle. Must be a pretty successful one if you can afford to fly musicians across the country for private lessons. Before he could respond, Lily's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and sighed. Sorry, I have to. Take this, it's my other job, she answered with practiced cheerfulness. Grind Coffee House, this is Lily. No, I can't come in early tomorrow. I already work 6 days a week. Yes, I understand we're short-staffed, but... Marcus watched her face tighten with frustration as the conversation continued. When she finally hung up, she looked exhausted. Everything. Okay? My manager wants me to cover someone's shift tomorrow morning. I already work 50 hours a week downstairs, plus I clean offices at night to pay rent, but apparently that's not enough. She rubbed her temples. Sorry, you don't need to hear about my employment problems. How much do you make in a week? The question was out before Marcus could stop himself. Lily's eyes narrowed slightly. Why? I'm trying to understand what it would take to bring you to Seattle for a few weeks. I don't want to disrupt your life, but I also need to know what we're working with. Look, Marcus, and I'm guessing that's not your full name. I appreciate whatever this is, but I've learned to be careful about offers that sound too good to be true. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her a photo of Sophia taken last month at her school's science fair. His daughter stood next to a volcano project, her smile polite but empty, the kind of expression that broke his heart daily. This is Sophia. She hasn't really smiled since her mother died. She barely speaks, barely eats, barely exists. The only time I see any spark in her eyes is when she mentions her mother's song. The song you somehow know. Lily studied the photo. Her expression, softening. She's beautiful, looks like her mom. In some ways, but she was light. She filled every room she entered with joy. Sophia used to be the same way, but now... He trailed off, surprised by how much he was revealing to this stranger. Grief hits kids different. They don't have the tools adults do. You sound like you speak from experience. My dad died when I was 12, heart attack. One day he was teaching me guitar chords, the next day he was gone. Lily curled up in her chair, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug. Took me years to play music again without crying. What changed? I realized music wasn't making me sad. It was the only thing that still connected me to him. Once I understood that, I could let it heal me instead of hurt me. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of the tight knot of grief he'd carried for 3 years. Would you be willing to help Sophia find that connection? I'm still not clear on the logistics. You want me to fly to Seattle? Teach your daughter this song and then what? I have a life here such as it is. What if I made it so you didn't have to worry about your jobs here? What if I could give you a month to focus entirely on music, both teaching Sophia and working on your own songs? What exactly are you offering? Marcus took a deep breath. $25,000 for 4 weeks in Seattle. I'll cover all travel and accommodation expenses. Plus, you'll have access to a professional recording studio if you want to work on your own material. Lily nearly dropped her coffee mug. $25,000? For 4 weeks of music lessons? For potentially giving my daughter her life back. Jesus, what kind of tech company do you run? The kind that can afford to invest in what matters. Marcus leaned forward, his voice taking on the persuasive tone that had closed billion-dollar deals. Lily, I've tried everything. Child psychologists, art therapy, grief counselors, medication. Nothing has worked. But hearing that melody tonight, it's the first time in 3 years I've felt hope. Lily was quiet for several minutes, staring into her coffee as if it held answers. Outside, Nashville's nightlife continued its eternal rhythm, music drifting up from the honky-tonks and tourist bars. There's something else, Marcus continued. Something I haven't told you about that song. What? Elena recorded herself singing it to Sophia, knowing she wouldn't be around much longer. But I lost the recording. It was on my phone when... He couldn't finish the sentence. Sophia blames herself for forgetting the words, and I blame myself for losing the only recording of her mother's voice. That's a lot of pressure to put on one song. I know, but it's all I have left to give her. Lily stood and walked to her piano, running her fingers silently over the keys. If I did this, and I'm not saying yes yet, I'd want some ground rules. I'm not just some hired entertainment. I'd need to understand Sophia, build trust with her, approach this as a real teacher-student relationship. Of course. And if it doesn't work, if she's not responsive, or if the song doesn't help the way you think it will, you can't blame me for that. I understand. Give me tonight to think about it. This is a big decision." Marcus stood, pulling a business card from his wallet. When Lily saw the Rothwell Technologies logo and his full name, her eyes widened. "You're that Marcus Rothwell, the billionaire. Does that change anything?" "It explains the $25,000 offer." She studied the card, then looked back at him. "But it also makes me wonder why you were walking around downtown Nashville alone, talking to street musicians. Sometimes being worth billions makes you the loneliest person in the room. And sometimes it just means you've forgotten how to connect with people who don't want anything from you." Marcus paused at her door. "For what it's worth, I don't think you want anything from me except honesty." "You're right, and that's exactly why I'm considering this crazy idea." Lily's first glimpse of Seattle came through the airplane window as they descended through a layer of clouds that seemed to go on forever. The city spread out below like a circuit board, all geometric patterns and water features that reminded her why people called it the Emerald City. Marcus had insisted on flying, her first class, an experience that felt surreal after 5 years of bus rides and borrowed cars. "Different from Nashville," Marcus said, noticing her pressed face against the window. "Everything's so green, even in October. Wait until you see it up close. Elena used to say Seattle was the most beautiful city in the world when the sun came out." They collected her single suitcase and guitar case, then walked toward the exit where a driver waited with a sign bearing her name. Lily had expected Marcus to seem more comfortable on his home turf, but if anything, he appeared more tense. As they approached the city, the drive to downtown Seattle took them past neighborhoods that spoke of old money and older trees. The houses grew larger and more impressive as they climbed toward the hills, until finally they arrived at a glass tower that seemed to pierce the sky itself. "You live in your office building?" Lily asked as they entered a private elevator that required a key card. "The top 3 floors are residential." It seemed practical after Elena got sick. Marcus's voice carried the same distant tone she'd noticed whenever he spoke about his wife's illness. The elevator opened directly into a foyer that was larger than Lily's entire Nashville apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Elliott Bay and the Olympic Mountains, while modern art and sculptures created an atmosphere that was impressive and intimidating in equal measure. "Lily's here, Sophia," Marcus called out as they entered the main living area. A small figure appeared at the top of a curved staircase, gripping the banister with both hands. Sophia Rothwell was even more delicate in person than in her photograph, with her mother's dark hair and her father's sharp blue eyes. She wore a school uniform that looked perfectly pressed, as if she'd been sitting very still all day. "Hi, Sophia," Lily said gently. "I'm Lily. Your dad told me you like music." The little girl nodded but didn't speak, descending the stairs with careful precision. An older woman appeared behind her, Mrs. Henderson, the housekeeper Marcus had mentioned during their flight. "Sophia's been very excited to meet you," Mrs. Henderson said with the kind of warm authority that suggested she'd been with the family for years. "Haven't you, sweetheart?" Another nod, but Sophia's eyes never quite met Lily's. Marcus had arranged for Lily to stay in the building's guest suite on the floor below the penthouse, a space that was larger and more luxurious than anywhere she'd ever lived. After settling in, she joined the family for dinner, where she began to understand the dynamics that grief had created. Marcus sat at the head of a dining table that could accommodate a small dinner party, while Sophia occupied a chair that seemed to swallow her small frame. The conversation was polite but stilted, punctuated by long silences that spoke volumes about the emotional distance between father and daughter. "How was school today, Soph?" Marcus asked. "Fine. Did you finish your book report?" "Yes." "What was it about?" Sophia shrugged, poking at her grilled chicken with mechanical precision. Lily noticed she ate very little, despite Mrs. Henderson's gentle encouragement. "I read that book too," Lily said casually. "Charlotte's Web, right? I always cried at the end." For the first time, Sophia looked directly at her. "You did? Every time. I must have read it 6 times as a kid, and I always hoped it would end differently. Daddy says crying doesn't change anything." The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus's face tightened, but before he could respond, Lily spoke up. "Your daddy's probably right about some things, but I think crying can change how we feel inside. Sometimes that's just as important." Sophia considered this with the seriousness that only children could bring to profound ideas. "Do you cry when you sing sad songs?" "Sometimes. Music is supposed to make us feel things, even if those feelings are uncomfortable. Mommy used to cry sometimes when she sang to me, but she said they were happy tears." The admission seemed to surprise everyone, including Sophia herself. It was the most she'd spoken since Lily's arrival, and definitely the first time she'd volunteered information about her mother. Marcus cleared his throat. "Maybe we should show Lily the music room after dinner." The music room turned out to be a converted bedroom that Elena had designed as a creative space. A baby grand piano dominated the center, surrounded by other instruments that appeared rarely used. Framed photographs showed Elena at various stages of life, as a young woman in college, on her wedding day, holding newborn Sophia. Mommy wasn't a professional musician, Sophia explained, her voice barely above a whisper. But she said music was the language of feelings. "She sounds like a very wise woman," Lily said, settling at the piano bench. "Would you like to hear the song your dad heard me playing in Nashville?" Sophia nodded, climbing onto the bench beside her. Lily began playing the melody that had brought them all together, humming softly at first, then adding the lyrics she'd written about highways and dreams. But as she played, she watched Sophia's face and began to understand something important. This wasn't just about remembering a song. This was about giving a grieving child permission to feel joy again without betraying her mother's memory. When the song ended, Sophia was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a voice so soft Lily had to strain to hear it, she said, "That's Mommy's melody, but those aren't her words." "No, they're my words. But maybe we could find your mommy's words together. Would you like that?" For the first time since Lily's arrival, Sophia smiled. Just a small upturn at the corners of her mouth, but unmistakably real. "Could we start tomorrow?" "We could start right now if you want." Sophia looked toward the doorway where Marcus stood, watching, his expression unreadable. "Is it okay, Daddy?" "It's okay, sweetheart. It's more than okay." As Lily began teaching Sophia the basic chord progression, she caught sight of Marcus wiping his eyes. Outside the windows, Seattle's lights twinkled like stars, and for the first time in 3 years, the Rothwell home filled with the sound of music. 3 weeks into her stay, Lily had established a routine that surprised her with its comfort. Mornings were spent in the music room with Sophia, afternoons exploring Seattle while the little girl was at school, and evenings often included dinner with the family. What had started as a business arrangement was becoming something more complex and meaningful. Sophia's progress had been remarkable, but gradual. The first week she'd barely spoken during their lessons. The second week she'd begun humming along, with Lily's playing. Now, as they sat together at the piano on a gray Thursday morning, Sophia was actually singing, tentatively, quietly, but singing nonetheless. "The melody is definitely coming back to you," Lily said, adjusting Sophia's hand. "Position on the keys. But I think the words your mom used were different from mine." "I remember some of them," Sophia admitted. "She used to sing about sunshine and rainbows, and how much she loved me. But there were other verses that changed every night. That's because she was making them up as she went along. The best lullabies are the ones that come from the heart, in the moment." Marcus appeared in the doorway, coffee mug in hand. Over the past 3 weeks, Lily had watched him slowly relax, his rigid business facade giving way to glimpses of the man Elena had fallen in love with. He'd started joining their evening sessions, initially as an observer, but increasingly as a participant. "How are my favorite musicians this morning?" he asked, settling into the armchair that had become his designated spot. "Daddy, listen," Sophia said, her voice containing more excitement than Lily had heard before. She began playing the melody, her small fingers finding the right keys with growing confidence. while she sang words that were part memory, part improvisation. Golden sunshine, silver rainbows, mommy loves you every day, when you're sleeping, when you're dreaming, love will never go away. Marcus's coffee mug trembled in his hands. These weren't exactly Elena's words, but they captured the essence of what she'd been trying to tell their daughter every night. "That was beautiful, Soph," he managed to say. "But it's still not right," Sophia said, frustration creeping into her voice. Mommy's version was different. She had a verse about stars and another one about dancing, and she always ended with something special, but I can't remember what. Lily had been thinking about this problem for days. "Sophia, what if we tried something different? What if, instead of trying to remember exactly what your mom sang, we created new verses that feel like something she would have sung? But then, it wouldn't be mommy's song anymore." "Would it help if I told you something about songwriting?" Lily asked gently. "The best songs aren't just collections of words and notes. They're feelings that get passed from one person to another. Your mom's song isn't really about the exact words she used. It's about the love she wanted you to feel every time you heard it." Marcus leaned forward. "Lily's right, sweetheart. Your mom cared more about you feeling loved than about you remembering every single word perfectly." Sophia considered this with the gravity she brought to all important decisions. "Could we write verses that sound like things Mommy would have said?" "We could try," Lily said. "What are some things you remember your mom talking about? Not just in the song, but any time?" "She loved the garden. She always said flowers were proof that the world wanted to be beautiful." "That's lovely. What else?" "She said I was her little star, especially when I was being silly or making her laugh." "And she used to dance with you, didn't she?" Marcus added. "In the kitchen while dinner was cooking?" Sophia's face lit up with the memory. "She said dancing was just moving to the music in your heart, even if nobody else could hear it." Over the next hour, they worked together to create new verses that honored Elena's memory, while allowing Sophia to make the song her own. Lily provided musical guidance. Marcus contributed memories of his wife's favorite phrases and expressions, and Sophia offered the pure honesty that only children possess. The breakthrough came when Sophia began singing about stars. "Little starlight, shine so bright, mommy's love will guide your way. Through the darkness, through the silence, love will never fade away." "That's it," Marcus exclaimed, startling them both. "Elena always called you her little starlight. She said you were the brightest thing in her universe." Tears were streaming down Sophia's face, but for the first time since Lily had known her, they seemed to be tears of joy rather than grief. "I remember now," Sophia whispered. "She always ended by saying I was her starlight and that starlight never dies. It just travels far away but still shines." "Do you want to try singing the whole song?" Lily asked. Sophia nodded, wiping her cheeks. With Lily accompanying her on piano, and Marcus humming along from his chair, she sang their reconstructed version of Elena's lullaby. It wasn't the same song Elena had sung 3 years ago, but it was something perhaps more precious, a bridge between past and present, grief and healing, memory and hope. When the last note faded, the music room was quiet except for the soft sound of rain against the windows. Then Sophia did something that shocked them all. She launched herself from the piano bench into Marcus's arms, hugging him with a fierceness that suggested months of stored-up affection finally being released. "Thank you, Daddy," she whispered into his shoulder. "Thank you for bringing Lily here. Thank you for letting us help you remember," he whispered back. That evening, after Sophia had gone to bed still humming her reconstructed lullaby, Marcus and Lily sat in his study overlooking Elliott Bay. The city lights reflected off the water like scattered diamonds, and for the first time since Lily's arrival, she felt the weight of what would happen when her month in Seattle ended. "She's going to be okay," Lily said, more to convince herself than him. "Because of you. Because she was ready. I just happened to be here with the right key at the right time." Marcus was quiet for several minutes, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "What happens now? Do you go back to Nashville and pretend this never happened?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither had fully acknowledged. Over the past 3 weeks, something had shifted in the dynamics between them. What had started as a business arrangement had evolved into something that felt dangerously close to intimacy. "I don't know," Lily admitted. "I hadn't thought much beyond helping Sophia." "What if you didn't have to go back? What if you stayed?" "Seattle. As what, Sophia's permanent music teacher? As whatever you wanted to be." Lily looked at him, really looked, and saw not the billionaire businessman who had approached her in Nashville, but a man who had spent 3 years rebuilding his life around his daughter's needs, and was only now beginning to consider his own. "Marcus, I can't be Elena's replacement. I'm not asking you to be, I'm asking you to be yourself here with us." Outside, a ferry moved slowly across the bay, its lights creating a pathway on the dark water. Lily thought about her cramped apartment above the coffee shop, her multiple jobs, her dreams of musical success that always seemed just out of reach. Then she thought about Sophia's smile that afternoon, and the way Marcus had looked when his daughter hugged him, and the possibility of being part of something larger than her individual ambitions. "Ask me again in a week," she said finally. "When my month is officially up and we can all think clearly about what this really is. And if I ask you to stay, then I'll probably say yes, and that terrifies me more than anything." Marcus smiled, the first genuinely relaxed smile she'd seen from him. "Good. The best decisions are the ones that scare us a little." A week later, Lily found herself standing in the same music room where everything had begun. But this time, the atmosphere was entirely different. Sophia sat at the piano, confidently playing her reconstructed lullaby for her grandparents, who had flown up from San Francisco to witness their granddaughter's transformation. "She sounds just like Elena when she was that age," Maria Castellano whispered to her husband, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "Music was always how our Elena expressed love," Giuseppe nodded, his own eyes bright with unshed tears. "The bambina has found her voice again." Marcus stood beside Lily, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. They'd spent the week talking, really talking, about what a future together might look like. It wouldn't be simple. There would be questions about motives, adjustment periods, and the complex dynamics of building a relationship in the shadow of grief. But for the first time in years, both of them felt ready to try. When Sophia finished playing, she turned to face the adults with a confidence that would have been unimaginable a month earlier. "Grandma, Grandpa, I want to sing you Mommy's song, but it's not exactly the same as before. Lily helped me make it better." "We'd love to hear it, Stelina," Giuseppe said, using Elena's childhood nickname. As Sophia's clear voice filled the room with music and memory and hope, Lily realized that sometimes the most profound healing comes not from recapturing what was lost, but from creating something new that honors the past while embracing the future. The song ended with Sophia's favorite verse, "Little starlight, shine. So bright, Mommy's love will guide your way. Through the darkness, through the silence, love will never fade away. Now I'm singing, now I'm dreaming, and I know that you can hear every note and every whisper. Mommy's love is always near." In the silence that followed, Marcus reached for Lily's hand, intertwining their fingers in a gesture that felt both natural and revolutionary. Sophia noticed and smiled, not the polite, careful smile she'd worn for 3 years, but the radiant expression that had once lit up every room she entered. "Are you going to stay with us, Lily?" she asked with the directness that only children could manage. "Would you like me to?" "Yes. We make good music together." "Then I'll stay." Outside, Seattle's eternal drizzle had given way to unexpected sunshine, streaming through the windows and painting everything in golden light. And in a penthouse high above the city, 3 people who had been broken by loss discovered that sometimes the most beautiful songs are the ones we write together, one note at a time, one day at a time, one moment of trust at a time. The lullaby that had brought them together would never be exactly what Elena had sung, but it had become something perhaps more precious, a bridge between past and future, a testament to the idea that love doesn't end with death but transforms, finding new voices to carry its message forward. As Sophia began teaching her grandparents the chord progression, her laughter mixing with the music and the sound of rain beginning again outside, Lily understood that she hadn't just helped a little. Girl, remember a song. She'd helped a family remember how to hope.